Excellent. Today we have speaking to us somebody that we only met about 6 or 7 weeks ago at the Westmount Day in Westmount Park in the end of May. Right across from our table was a little section that had 3 containers in it. And every time you went to throw something out, there was somebody there to tell you where you were supposed to put it. And on that day, we met Gabriela Lopes. Now, Gabriela is the community coordinator for Enuf Canada. And I'm going to let her explain what Enuf Canada is. That's ENUF. From 2016 to 2018, Gabriela was a volunteer with a new student group at Concordia University called Waste Not, Want Not. It was an educational initiative aimed at helping the community learn about composting and the infrastructure efforts being deployed by the university. In 2018, she graduated from Concordia with a double major in psychology and communications and cultural studies and went on to study law at McGill. She's remained active with Waste Not in subsequent years and has helped them create educational materials like graphic and video content, and volunteering as a waste ambassador at events, which is how we met her. During that time, Waste Not became Enuf, a corporation with the mission to do what it takes to solve the waste crisis, and it gained B Corp certification thanks to their demonstrated commitments to environmental and social justice. And Gabriela will be explaining to us what B Corp is. She's going to be talking about Enuf's creation, its mission and goals, and its long-term visions. And with that, Gabrielle, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. It was really nice to meet you guys. I had never heard of the Rotary Club before, so I was very interested. I looked it up online and I thought that you guys are pretty cool as well. So thank you for inviting me. And I have to be honest, usually I do this as a sales pitch, but I'm imagining that that is not the vibe that we're going with today. So the PowerPoint that I have is really just very short. It's mostly just for some pictures, and I'm also going to be sharing my screen and showing you our website and stuff like that, just to give you some more information about what we do and how we do it. Share. Cool. This is actually my first time screen sharing from my computer as I'm on with my iPad, which is why there's 2 different people with my name on the screen right now. I don't know how to make it so that it doesn't show this on the side here. It's okay. We're going to survive. We'll do one thing at a time, and I'll show you the pictures as we go. So yeah, I'm Gabriela. I have always been really passionate about food, mostly just for eating food. But as I grew up and learned more about the world and how food gets to our table and where it goes after I've eaten it, or what happens to the leftovers on my plate, I started to become really self-conscious about what's going on, and I wanted to be implicated with solving the problem. So the problem could actually be summarized by this picture here. What do you see when you look at this picture? And this is a really cool initiative by Concordia University. They have this wall with they're growing lettuce and other edible plants on it. And they have the 3 bins, card for recycling, waste, and so I guess sorted recycling and waste in front of this really nice wall. And what we notice is even as we're doing the work that is very flashy and very demonstrative of our commitments to environmental sustainability, at the same time, we have these overflowing bins. We have a bunch of people that don't really care about sorting their waste, who just want to toss everything in whatever bin is available and then be on their merry way. And this is not a problem with individuals. This is not an issue of character. This is not a problem with people who just don't care. This is, we have started to realize, a very systemic issue. the infrastructure that exists is not well suited for the real deep transformative change that needs to happen for us to be able to solve the waste crisis. And when I talk about waste crisis, what I really mean is that Canada, as individuals per capita, we are the largest generators of waste. We consume a lot, we throw out a lot, and even our recycling programs and our waste management programs are very faulty. Of everything that we throw into the recycling bin, hoping that it gets repurposed, only 9% actually ends up getting properly recycled, and the rest either gets diverted back to the landfill or gets exported to other countries that then are stuck with our mismanaged waste. Of what we throw into the garbage directly, half of that is organic materials, which means either food, leftovers, soiled paper, brown paper. When we work in institutions, we found that a lot of what goes into the garbage bins is actually just brown paper that people use to dry their hands and then throw in the garbage bin. And all of this could be diverted to composting rather than to the landfills. And what happens differently when you throw it into a compost bin rather than a landfill bin is that because landfills are basically just piles of garbage that get crushed down to make more space, there is no more oxygen that arrives at the materials in the center of the pile, and they rot rather than decompose. They produce methane, they leach a lot of, I forget this word in English, but like toxins into the water, into the soil. And
leachate.
Pardon? Leachate, yes, exactly. And landfills are the 5th leading emitter of methane in Quebec. That's huge. So focusing on waste reduction really made us feel like it was a very tangible effort that could be made towards reducing the waste crisis. And it's the entryway that brought me into working with, at the time it was called Waste Not Want Not in 2016, because I was working with food sustainability and they were working with compost, and I thought those were, inextricable from each other. So we are an education company first and foremost. We want to influence a cultural shift. So back to that picture at the beginning, yes, we have really beautiful projects that show that we're committed and we want to do things differently, and it looks nice and it makes you feel good in the space. But deeper than that, we also want to affect how people think of waste, because waste in and of itself is a social construct. If you believe that something that is left over from your consumption is no longer useful to you, you're going to throw it into the garbage bin, it'll go to the landfill, it'll be forgotten and rot away and produce methane and contribute to the climate crisis. But if you change your mindset about what it is that you're holding once you've finished, once it's stopped being useful to you, and you try to recover usefulness for it, then it's not waste anymore. And it gets reincorporated into the life cycle of our products. We have a closed loop economic system, which at the end of the day is what we really want to move toward. We want to get people to stop blindly consuming and throwing away, and really be conscientious of the full life cycle of the things that we use in everyday life, and have a more, be more mindful about how we consume, what we consume, and why we consume it. So I'm gonna leave it on this slide a little bit, but basically when I got involved, Waste Not Want Not, it used to be a student organization at Concordia University that was founded by Kirolis Riyad, who's our CEO currently. And he was an engineering student, and he just had one semester project to work on helping the Concordia administration, who had just started implementing composting at an infrastructural level, to help the Concordia community learn how to sort their waste properly and reduce contamination in those bins. And after the end of the semester, he was like, I can't stop. This is really important work. I have to keep going and try to expand this influence that we've gained as much as possible. So for the following 4 years, Waste Not Want Not began to grow in influence within the Concordia community. And they were present at all kinds of student union-led events. even administration-led events. Wherever there was food that would be served, we would show up with our little t-shirts and our signs, and we would help stand by the bins, as Jim was saying, and we would help people bring, sort their waste. And really at the end of the day, it's not very glamorous, but we would just stand there and be like, look at what you're holding, examine it, tell me what it is, what are the materials, how would you sort this, and then giving them more information as they needed it. I really like that part of my job. It's very fun. And the more I do it, the more I realize that, again, this is not an individual problem. This is not an issue of lack of interest or lack of care, because 90% of the people that I speak to at these events care. It's very obvious that they want to take the time to do things properly. It's just extremely overwhelming. If you go to an event and they give you multiple different products, they give you a lunchbox with little plastic containers, a styrofoam box, it's got paper left over, it's leftover food. The food is wrapped in wax paper. You're not sure what to do with the wax paper. It's so much easier to just crumple it all together and put it into the landfill. Or what other people do is called wish cycling. They put everything into the recycling bin, wishing that it will be recycled. Ends up just being a bunch of contamination that then gets diverted to the landfill anyways. So again, this is not an issue with individuals. This is an issue with infrastructure, with the policies that exist, with the priorities that governments and businesses have in terms of how they manage their resources and what they put out onto the market. So we continued growing at Concordia and trying to get more influence within the administration. And then that's when things started to get a little bit difficult, because the administration started being very reticent about transparency. There was the impression that since Concordia was really leading the charge and they had all these initiatives, they didn't want any negative, negativity about their work being talked about. And what we were really doing at the end of the day was saying, this is really nice, but it doesn't go far enough. We have to solve, there's this problem, there's that problem, there's all kinds of little issues that we need to iron out, and we have to have a lot of more resources from the administration devoted to these things. And it came across as like Concordia is not doing enough. And so it was not very good for their branding. And so they didn't really want to be too deeply associated with us anymore. And they stopped really being as collaborative. And we actually had to get the Concordia Student Union to make a demand, a request of information access, because they were just not giving us information anymore. So that's when we really figured that having partnerships with institutions are important, but it's not sufficient. There needs to be a much more grassroots movement as well to get pressure from the general public to influence these institutions to really start putting their money where their mouth is. And that's about when I left Concordia. I graduated, and then I went on to McGill Law. And I feel like what I really learned was how to speak in a way that is convincing. Because how do you convince institutions to just care more? Don't you just want to love the environment a little bit more? That's never enough in this day and age. We have to have a much more strategic approach to how we convince different groups to change their culture. And so going to law school was a lot about that. And then I recently graduated, and I have been hired full-time by Enuf at, I guess I skipped the part where while I was in law school, Waste Not Want Not became incorporated as Enuf Canada. And Enuf is actually a play on words for, so there's like this little egg here at the bottom. This is our logo, un œuf in French, an egg. It really symbolizes the circularity of what we're trying to achieve, the like egg and chicken, which one came first question. Kind of has like this cyclical connotation to it. And so the egg with the plant growing out of it has all of this imagery and this like, we're trying to close the loop connotation to it. So that's where the name Enuf comes from. And Enuf, you can see it on the first slide over here. Enuf, that's our logo. Yeah, so they became corporatized, and incorporation in Canada, there isn't the B Corp certification, the type of company that makes you a not-for-profit corporation. There's only a certification, which is an international certification called B Corp. I forget what the B stands for. I'm really sorry. I always say B Corp and I never say the full name. And so I guess I erased it from my mind. But basically, it's an international certification. They go over your processes. They go over your incorporate constitution. They go over your employee management or relations. Thank you. So someone just shared the link. This is it. So you can find us here. That's us, certified since this year. And these are, oh, you can't see that. Let me see if I can change my screen. New share. Let's go to my screen one. Share. Excellent. So this is the B Corp website. This is us. Here, I'll go backwards. This is the B Corp website. You can find all kinds of different companies, and this is ours. And basically what they look at is governance, community, environment, and customers. We just barely made the cut into a B Corp. We have still a lot of work to do. As you can see over here, this is the median score of all companies. There's about 15% of all companies that apply for B Corp certification that get it. And you have to have a cutoff right here. And this is us. So we made it. We're officially a B Corp. We still have a lot of work to do. We're still trying to improve a lot of our practices, specifically for our customers. But this is just to demonstrate that we are truly committed to the entire cultural mission that we gave ourselves. We can't really say that we're involved with social justice and environmental justice if we don't also practice what we preach internally. And so we're really proud to have gotten that certification. So I graduated from law school this year. I recently joined Enuf full-time as the community coordinator. And my job is to broaden our impact, because deep impact, which is basically talking to one person at length, giving them extensive information about the processes of compost, the infrastructure that exists for production and post-consumption, all of the technical details that we understand from a functional part, is not very useful for education purposes, because it doesn't give us the breadth of talking to a lot of different people, because when you want to talk very deeply about a topic, you have to focus your attention on a person at a time. And that's not really what we're going for. We want to have broad impact as much as possible, make this information accessible, bite-sized, easy to consume, easy to understand, so that it's then shared with people's relations with their communities, and it kind of like herd immunity. That's why this is Carolus' thing. He says this all the time, so I just kept it into the slides because I think it's kind of cute. But it's basically the approach of vaccines for herd immunity. You're not trying to make a single person 100% healthy. You're trying to get as many people as possible above a certain threshold of health, so that the community is protected as a whole. So our services, what we do, technically speaking, is we do a lot of information gathering for our clients. So we go into I'm going to tell you what we did for Laurier MacDonald High School recently. We went into the school, we took all of the bins of recycling and garbage that they had collected over the week. We dumped it onto the ground. We went through it piece by piece. We sorted everything, we weighed everything, and then we created a report for them that told them how much contamination they have, what are the materials that are being thrown into the recycling bin, into the garbage bin, how much contamination is there in the recycling bin, and how much of what is thrown into the garbage bin could have be put into the recycling bin. And finally, how much of all of this is actually compostable? How much of it is organic waste that could be diverted from landfill or recycling to composting? And this is important because the city of Montreal is increasingly spreading out the services that they offer for waste collection. So most, if not all, residences by the end of this year on the island of Montreal will be offered municipal services for compost collection alongside their green and black bins that they, or blue and black, depends where you live, bins that you put outside. You can also now put a brown bin with your organic waste, which is usually kitchen surplus or garden stuff like grass clippings and dried leaves that you rake up in the fall. So to be able to implement all this inside the schools, they need a lot of information about, you know, what is being thrown out, how can this be diverted from landfill to organic waste, and like very practically speaking, how many bins are they going to need? How much organic waste are they producing, and how many bins are they going to need to be able to collect all of it? We also recently have started collecting organic waste. So if, for example, our latest partner, we were at a festival up in Tohu, which is like a circus and performing arts event venue on the northern end of Montreal Island. They're really cool, by the way. If you ever have the opportunity to go check them out, I think you'd really enjoy it. But we found out while we were doing waste ambassadors at their event this last week that all the compost that they were so diligently sorting and putting in the compost bins and sending off to be picked up by their service provider wasn't actually getting properly composted. There was a lot of this new kind of plastic called number 7 plastic, which was corn-based and which was certified compostable. Tohu had gone through the effort of supplying themselves with compostable materials for their restaurants and stuff. And then it turned out that the company that was picking up their compost actually was not able to compost plastic number 7. They were resorting it and throwing it into the landfill afterwards. So our partner for organic waste collection is one of the 3 in Quebec that is 100% certified able to recycle compostable plastic, compost the compostable plastic. So we offered them the pickup services, and now we hopefully will become their official, regular service provider. On top of collecting and disposing of compost, we also collect surplus food. So a lot of events that have catering end up having surplus that they have to get rid of afterwards. And usually it goes into the compost bin, garbage bin, or if some people want to, who work, oopsies, my battery's dying. Some people who work at the event will often take surplus, but that's not a sustainable or, reliable infrastructure. So we are building a community of community fridges around Montreal. There's a lot of existing ones that are not doing so well since COVID that are like locally community-based. There's a lot in different universities, and at Concordia University, we are implementing 2 refrigerators, one on each campus, that are going to be able to accept the organic waste that we collect, and then it'll go back to the community. Because it turns out actually that one of the most food insecure groups in Canada is students. 40% of them have had to choose paying for tuition or rent or whatever other expenses over eating good, healthy food. So this surplus food redistribution is also not only going to be good to reduce waste, it's going to be good to help protect our communities. And finally, we do educational materials and campaigns, which basically is just the waste ambassador that we do. We have our t-shirts, our signs, we go stand next to the bins during events. We do training for or institutions that are implementing composting, for example, their janitorial custodian services. We do trainings at school. So in the fall for McDonald Laurier High School, we're actually going to be training their green team. Thank you, that's nice. We're going to be training their green team, which is just student volunteers who are committed to sustainability, to be helping them be the waste ambassadors in their community. Because we know that if it's someone from within your own community that is trying to influence you, there are much higher chances of you being influenced than if it is an external third party, a stranger. So we're really excited to be collaborating with schools like this, and we hope to expand this as much as possible. We have a really big community already. We're really happy about how much people seem motivated by the work that we're doing. We have this little campaign called See You Compost, See You Compost. Another play on words by Corellis, and I'm not sure I like it, but it is what it is. So we have this hashtag See You Compost, and we invite people to put a picture of themselves or their pets or their houseplants or whoever they want to represent, the message that they write on this little paper, and then we post it on our social media. And this is a demonstration of the network that exists to tackle this problem. Because again, I want to emphasize, this is not an individual problem and therefore not an individual solution. It's not about personal habits. This is a collective problem that requires collective solutions, which include individual habits, but cannot be limited to that, because that is extremely overwhelming and unfair for the scope and breadth of the problem. So demonstrating this existing community, not only here in Montreal, but also internationally. We have all kinds of partners around the world, and we've shown up in a couple different news outlets. This is important because this is what motivates people to really change. If you think that you're doing an individual habit, you're going to break or get burnt out really quickly. If you're doing it because you're joining a community that is shifting a culture, it's much easier. And that's what this is all about. So yeah, this is our website, enufcanada.ca, has a bunch of information about us, our team, our work, our clients, our goals, our missions moving forward. We're on all the different social medias. We have an amazing social media coordinator who's in charge of that. So I'm gonna shout out to Leanne. I love you so much. So at Enuf Canada on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, not Reddit, but TikTok, whatever you happen to be on, you can probably find us. And on our website as well at enufcanada.ca, we have a calculator tool that helps our potential clients see exactly what they have for their, organize their budget around what services we offer. So this is also included in our transparency mission, because there's nothing I hate more than trying to figure out how much something costs and then having to go through a whole estimation process and potentially be hooked as have to give my email address, and then I'm going to get 100 emails trying to pressure me to buy things. So no, the information is all there on the website. If you want to know what we do, how much it costs, transparently available. And that is it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. I've got a ton of questions, but if anybody else would like to go first, put up your hand or unmute yourself and shout it out. The first one I have actually is, how does Enuf finance it? I take it you're charging people for the services?
So initially, because we were a student organization, we got a lot of funding from a collection of incredibly generous organizations that are basically, they have money to give to student projects, initiatives that are devoted to certain topics, and environmental sustainability and food sustainability being one of them. Currently, we still receive funding from one of them called SHIFT, capital, all caps, SHIFT. It's still a Concordia-based organization, and we're using an ongoing connections grant with them, because what they really are dedicated to is funding long-term sustainable organizations. And they give like an initial injection of funds to get yourself set up, but then they also give regular grants until you break even, until you're able to sustain yourself. So that's what we're getting most of our money from right now, but we also do have clientele, and we're trying to get more.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I ask a question?
Well, yeah, hang on a second, Merle. I'm going to let Nadia in here first.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two questions for you. The community fridges sounds very, very interesting. And the first question that came to mind is, I'm assuming that you have a way of mitigating and handling food appropriately, or whoever is supplying it, so that there's no contamination and no possibility of someone becoming sick by getting this food. And the second question I have is, are you familiar with various apps? There's one called Food Hero that I heard about. It's seems to, there's some apps that are very popular in Vancouver and British Columbia, especially for merchants who may have leftover, say, leftover bread, would like to sell it or get rid of it rather than throwing it out. They either donate or post it on an app, and you as a consumer can order, say, I will come and buy your package, whatever that you're offering, and they offer it to the consumer at a very reduced rate. I wonder if you have heard of these or maybe even have thought of doing something like that. Thank you. That was very interesting.
Great questions. For the first one, food fridge and food safety. Yes, we have. Okay, so first of all, we have to talk to the caterers, because sometimes the way that they wrap their food is not safe. And so our first point of action would be to get the caterers to individually wrap the food to make sure that when they're serving it, it's been refrigerated if necessary for the entirety of the event, and that not as a safety issue, but because of our mandate to also make sure that the materials that they're using are going to be compostable as much as possible. And then we would, our ambassadors who would be at the events would take the food that was being served there and maintain appropriate context and refrigerated if necessary. And then we have our vehicle, which has refrigerated like coolers inside of them to transport it, and we would clean them regularly, make sure that they're hygienic. And then when we get to the refrigerators, our waste ambassadors are also committed to keeping that clean. And we have like a board in the back that we make inspections, and we make sure that we initial everything with the date and time. And we inspect it visually or olfactorily, the food inside the fridge, to make sure that it's okay. Make sure that everything is labeled properly. Date of production, when it was at the event, how it was at the event, what are the ingredients inside the food item. And at the end of the day, it is up to the consumer to decide whether or not they want to take that food. We do as much as we can to make sure it's as safe as possible, but we don't take responsibility for if somebody gets sick or not. For free donation of food like that, it's the most that we can do, is to be as transparent as possible, to be as meticulous as possible on our end, but we cannot guarantee 100% safety. So there is a lot of consumer discretion in this kinds of setups. Secondly, the apps, and so there is one called Second Harvest. It's the biggest one in Canada who does redistribution of food, and we are partnering with them to implement this work. There are some others that we are reaching out to because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. If somebody's already doing this is definitely some people that we have to connect to. And my job as the community coordinator is actually to reach out to these different groups as much as possible. Like I had mentioned earlier, there are existing fridges around Montreal already. And I wouldn't want to replace them. I would want to just supply them with more food, give them a more stable source of food for their communities. I hope that answers your questions. I have to plug my iPad in, so the view is going to change. Sorry about that. All right.
And Merle, you're up.
Yes, one of the most confusing parts of my day, which you can't help me with, is sorting out what goes into the recycle. And I check everything that I buy, like from the butcher counter, from the French food counter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm alarmed about how many companies package their food in non-recyclable containers. And I'm wondering if there's something that can be done at the local or the area level that can persuade these companies to change their mode of distribution of their products?
At the local level, I don't know. It really depends who you have connections with. We're trying to work with municipalities, with the government. My big ambition by the end of this year is to get an in somehow with Valérie Plante's government in Montreal to see what can be done from that angle. The government is already interested in this question. So the banning of single-use plastics, for example, is a big step in that direction. I work with some grade schools that receive catering from third parties, and that is huge source of waste. And that's not something that the school can fix. That's, I have to go to the caterer directly and ask them to change their materials.
I was thinking at the government level, maybe some kind of a tax or some kind of penalty.
It's ideally that is the solution, like an organized political movement that would create boundaries around what companies are allowed to do. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are a lot of protections in free market around that. So it's a very difficult conversation to have, to pass through Congress, to pass through Parliament, to get it to be signed and brought into law. For example, the single-use plastics ban was over a decade in the making. And once it passed into law, there was like a 5-year grace period for companies to transition into the new type of materials that they're going to use. So that is the goal. Yes, absolutely. That is the goal. How quickly that can happen depends how much influence you have.
I have none.
We're working on it.
I'm sure a lot of people do.
Ideally, honestly, this, like, my dream would be that it doesn't have to go through politics. It doesn't have to be enforced. It doesn't have to be policed. That would be something that the companies themselves would willingly commit to. They would, but it is a sink of resources. They have to trust that the marketing is going to be good at the other side of it, that they can bank on saying, hey, we are sustainable with our wrappers, consume with us rather than our competitor. And that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create partnerships with companies, trying to source reusable, compostable materials for them that are affordable to their budgets, and then give them a lot of social media clout for these efforts that they're doing.
Well, I think your effort is amazing, and I wish you all the best and get some of this stuff done.
Sorry, I'm reading the chat questions here right now. Nice. You guys are so nice. Thank you. How effective is it for us as consumers to not buy these products in non-recyclable packaging? Can that bring change? 100%, 100%. And I am a huge believer in grassroots movements. It's not what I focus on building right now, because I think that I don't really have the right. Community building is a big work already, and I've got to focus attention on one thing or the other, but I definitely think that grassroots movements is one of the most powerful things that can influence cultural change. So if as a consumer you're committed to changing your habits, changing your what you buy, how you deal with your waste afterwards, it's so powerful to then influence your community, for them to do the same, get people to back you in boycotting or replacing some brands with other brands. And there's a long history of changes being implemented this way. So yes, I think it's absolutely important.
Okay, anybody else? We're good? Excellent.
I think George might have a question.
Oh, George, sorry, go ahead. Have to unmute yourself, George. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. I don't know. I'm sure you're probably aware of the fact that Toronto has a system where people have 3 containers in their home and they have to split things up in that particular manner. In other words, the smaller one is all the stuff that can be passed along to others, um, given to farmers who are raising pigs. I mean, that type of food is, in most cases, perfect for them. Instead of it going into the, you know, I don't know if are you aware of Toronto? I only know basically that they have 3 containers and one of them is for all the edible waste that can go, not to be eaten by humans, but to be used in another manner for animals, for feed, etc.
I've never heard, I'm not very familiar with Toronto. I think that's super cool. That sounds like a really useful way of diverting food very quickly. If I would imagine that it's not all of Toronto that does that, because in Quebec, for example, there's not really a standardization of what waste is collected, how it's taken care of afterwards. It's all borough by borough, neighborhood by neighborhood. And I would imagine that Ontario is the same. And so I think that it must be some particular cities, boroughs in Toronto that are taking that initiative. And it's awesome. I've never heard of that. I'm definitely going to look into it, because that is closed loop cycle right there.
And my understanding is other containers are checked very carefully, that plastics are not put there, recyclable items in that 3rd container. And apparently it's monitored very carefully that households are told, excuse me, you're not following the rules. Here's a fine. So there, I know my daughter-in-law by marriage, she's got 3 containers on her counter, and she has to split things up accordingly. I think that's the beginning. And,
Splitting up is, I'm sure back in your day too, like they would pick up glass separately from metal separately, and a lot of it would be reused. Like your glass milk bottles, off the top of my head, wouldn't even need to be recycled. They would just be washed and refilled and redistributed. That I think that's definitely going to be a big part of the solution, is more micromanaging of rather than putting everything into a mixed bin, which just creates so much extra work for the triage center afterwards, because it's humans that go through it and sort it properly. But that's amazing. That's a really cool initiative.
It's interesting. Many moons ago, 75 years I'm talking about now, I was going to a camp, and they were already splitting. They were making sure that a lot of the food could be given to the farmer down the road. And of course, you had to be careful. You didn't throw cans in there. You didn't throw broken glass, etc. It's all the leftover food from plates that were coming off the tables had to go into this extra bin. And the farmer would come by every so often and gladly pick them up. It was feed for him for nothing, and as a way of us or the camp getting rid of it. But that was 75 years ago.
But that also points to another important part of the solution, which is reconnecting to the way that food is produced, where it comes from. It sounded like 75 years ago, you had a much better idea of where the pork came from. Like you could drive down the street, go look at the farm, and go look at the pigs that were being raised for you to eat. And nowadays, a significant proportion of grade school students don't realize that hamburgers and hot dogs are made with animals. So there is a very severe disconnect between consumers and the resources that they consume. And a big part of the solution is reconnecting us to that. And I think having personal relationships with the farmers is a splendid way to go about that. But now in this metropolis of Montreal, it's very difficult to get relationships with farmers. Yeah. So what we're pushing for more is like relationships with urban agricultures. There's a lot of community gardens and rooftop gardens and little farms popping up around Montreal. And some of them do local composting as well. They have composters on site. And so we would love to build, again, a network of these different farms, urban agricultures, to help the community reconnect to where their food comes from. And it's much easier to be motivated to separate your waste in the bins on your counter if you have a very clear idea of what's happening to it afterwards. Right now, a lot of people are disillusioned with sorting waste because they don't believe that it's gonna make any sort of difference. 9% of what I'm throwing in the recycled bin is actually getting recycled. Why bother sorting and rinsing at all? So I think you're onto something there for sure.
Thank you, George. Much appreciated. Gabriela, it's you can always tell by looking through the participants and watching what they're doing or not doing, that tells you that they're rapt. They're listening to this stuff, you know. And what strikes me that you've said is the fact that it is a systemic thing. It's not so much an individual thing. And you didn't specifically say it, but I get the sneaking suspicion that it's a generational thing. I know you're doing a lot of work with schools and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering, I get the feeling that this is something that you go out and you broaden among the youth and bring them up. And a generation from now, we're going to be a lot better off than we are now.
I definitely think that a generation from now, we're going to be better off than we are now, but I don't think it's because this generation is better than the generation that preceded it at all. I think that, well, first of all, your generation raised my generation. So if you think I'm clever, it's because you taught me to be clever. So that's definitely not the issue. I think that we are, so this is a research that I did when I went to law school, actually, systems. How did we get here? How did the world become so complicated? And a lot of my peers who now went to work in law have a belief that we shouldn't really trust individuals because given the opportunity, individuals are self-centered and they do things whatever they want to do. I really don't believe that. I think that people are caught up in the system. You're born into it. You don't know what you don't know anything besides what's given to you, first of all. And then you buy into that. You work your butt off your whole life. You've invested your entire time on earth into this knowledge that you were given. And then you're learning that it was bad all along. It happened. It wasn't very good. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't very kind to our community. It wasn't, collaborative and cooperative with our neighbors. But it wasn't because individual people decided to make it like this. I think we just there's multiple feedback loops that we get caught into, and we can't get ourselves out of them unless we take a big step back and recreate a new system that will catch us when we jump out of this one. So if the next generation is going to be the one that manages to create this alternative system, it's only because the current generation is giving us the tools to be able to do that. So I don't think that it's a generational problem at all. I just think that right now we're collecting resources as we go. Every generation gives the next one multiple gifts and resources, and we have a big collection of them now, and now we're able to use them in new ways. Now I'm able to talk to you guys from across the world, Cincinnati, apparently, really far away. So we're doing our best. Everybody's
I'm about to lose the power here to do things, Gabrielle. So I'm going to stop for a second for a minute, because I know that Heather has to leave us. When I made that comment about the generational thing, it was as much as anything to say that people like you who have gotten yourself so involved in this initiative is ultimately what is going to make it all work. You and others, and bringing it to the global community and saying, here's how we can help you get this done. And your spirit and your intensity when you're speaking is supercharging. It really is. And all I can say is, like, you just keep going. You go get them. And thank you ever so much for being with us today.
Way to go, Jim.
Thank you so much. That is very kind.